Hello, everyone. This is Randy and James again. Welcome to Passionately Wrong, and we are going to talk about useful apps and technology today.
My first question, Randy, would be, are apps and technology really useful, or are they continuing the theme from our prior episode, as much a distraction as they are a help?
Yeah, that's a good question, James. I think that, like we said before, we're kind of in the middle of the dinosaur age. You and I, we saw everything grow to what it is today. So, and it's not too beyond our touch to understand a lot of it. Though some of it, I'm like, why are people wasting time with that? I still don't get some of that. But I think that there's definitely some benefits to it. But I also think that some of the things that benefit, people see the benefits from it, and other people try to invent competitors to it. And then you end up with like 6 things that do almost the same thing with little tweaks. And then if you hadn't discovered that app before, now you have 6 choices, and you spend like a ridiculous amount of time trying to figure out which one's the best, when really one of them will probably fix your problem just fine, and the little differences don't matter. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, that's a good point. The app itself might actually be a useful thing and might help you with a workflow. But what I found most frustrating about apps over my career, and I'm going to come back to some of the bigger things that I tried to prevent, but what I saw was that there's a lot of friction associated with what you just said: finding the thing, implementing the thing, learning how to use the thing. Even when I fully agree it's useful to have an app, if I lose a significant amount of time choosing the app and installing the app and figuring out how to work with the app, then I've become counterproductive until I can become more productive. So you can't just look at the app in terms of what it's going to do for you. You have to look at it in terms of, how do I learn how to become effective with this app?
I also think that, we just had this problem earlier today. It's not just getting the app and falling in love with the app and then depending on the app, and then the update to the app doesn't work with the update to your Mac, software or hardware that's coming in, and then the way you saved it doesn't work with the update of the actual app. And all this is very confusing to me as a non-computer guy, and I just want the app to be the same way it is all for the rest of my life. And sometimes I want to make my life shorter because I can't get the app to do what it was doing yesterday.
Yeah, the interests of the people who want to sell us stuff, whether it's goods or services, are in opposition to the interests of people who are consuming those goods and services. You find a pair of running shoes that you like, you never want them to change, but the company that's selling those shoes needs to come up with something new to market them to you. So they change them every year, and you're forced to either buy 100 pairs of the old ones, or you say, all right, I'm going to try this new one. And with apps, of course, they update them for good reasons. It's not just so that they can sell you something new, but each update creates this cascade of potential consequences. I saw this in the business world in the sense of, how do we combat complexity? And the complexity that arises from introducing any new element into your workflow. So you've got 5 things in your workflow, you add a 6th thing to your workflow, you think, oh, well, that's only 20% more, or 15% more. It's not. It is exponentially, potentially more burdensome, because now you've got interactions with all of the other parts of your workflow that you didn't have before. So keeping your processes simple and easy to operate is one reason to be careful about introducing new apps, because they introduce an unbelievable amount of complexity.
I also think that if we're talking about personal usage of technology and apps, like you and I putting on our phone, software on our personal computer to do whatever, taxes or something like that, that's one part of the complexity of adjusting to the updates. And is it compatible with my Mac? Is it compatible with my Windows computer? Blah, 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 all that stuff. But if you're talking about introducing these apps and technology to your team, you have that, instruction part of it. which every time you get a new person to the team, you need to instruct him. And then in addition to that, if you're the arbitrator, controller, the best person at that technology, when you move on and get it promoted to another team or something, I've seen this so many times with like Access. Access, have you ever used Access?
No.
It's a Microsoft tool that's like a three-dimensional, the best way to explain it is it's a three-dimensional Excel, right? So you have an Excel, multiple different Excels for like a main Excel where if you had one Excel and you linked different Excel pages to it, it's all that. It's three-dimensional Excel is the best way I can explain it. You have one base data for everybody, but then you can apply it to different other Excel spreadsheets. So it takes a while to learn it. Some people can never learn it because it's just like, I don't know, programming or something, right? Where you have your base data and you can use the computer can use it in a million different ways. And some people just never get it. And you can teach them how to fill in. You can make it simplified. You can have forms and they can fill it out and just see kind of the output. And they're like, wow, this is great. But they can't actually get into the guts and make it better or change it with the times and stuff. And so if you invent this, Access program, not the program itself, but an Access, what's it called? Sheet or whatever, where you have you have a focus on a specific thing in your company to keep track of something. And then you move on and no one knows how to get into the guts and update it for the times and change it because there's one little error in it that needs to be fixed. Then all the information that was stored in that technology is lost to everybody, and it gets really weird. So I taught myself Access, and I used to use it, but every time I left, whenever I came back to visit, it was just like a little thing in the corner that no one ever used because no one could figure out how to use it the way I did it. So,
yeah, there's a distinction that is helpful to draw, and you started drawing it between the tools that we use personally and the tools we use because we're part of an organization. And I watched. I worked for a big company. We had thousands of employees all over the world. Big companies are sometimes rightly accused of being slow to change, exactly because change management is a huge part of introducing any new technology tool or changing a tool. I would say when I looked at the big project management we did for introducing new tools, at least half of the entire project was devoted not to the tool and learning how to use the tool and installing the tool, but just change management. How do you get thousands of employees, but any number of people, to learn to adopt a new process? You create a great deal of inefficiency before you get any efficiency gains. And when it comes to the personal side, the advice that we used to give our managers was use technology if it helps you, but helps you is not a question of only what's the function of the tool. Does that tool do something cool and useful? You should look at sort of what I'll call it the total cost of ownership. How long is it going to take you to figure out how to use that tool? How much time are you going to spend updating it? Are you going to have problems that you're the only one who knows how to use the tool? Like you're just saying, you're the Access guy and nobody else on your team is. Those are all frictions that make the tool ultimately less helpful than it could be. So my takeaway is, yes, from a personal perspective, use technology if it helps you. And from a business perspective, use technology if you have to. That learning curve, when you get into a new organization, it's real, right? You got to learn, okay, how do we communicate with each other? Is it by instant messaging? Is it by email? Do people send memos? People don't do that anymore, but
faxes.
All right. No, I mean, every organization is different. So there is this learning curve until you figure out, okay, here's where I find stuff. Here's where people store information. Here's the programs we use. Look like you wanted to add.
Yeah. So I guess in hand with that would be, you say use technology when you have to, but you also have to realize that there's going to be, so I don't know, you probably remember because you're the same age as me, when there was Microsoft Word, Word Perfect, and some other random things out there, right? And the military was just starting to get into computers, in the late 80s, early 90s when I came into the military. And people had their favorites from college. Most of it is just officers using it who had college. The enlisted at the time when I came in, most enlisted didn't have college. I was an exception to the rule. But most of the officers were the only ones who had college, and they'd use computers, not laptops because they didn't have them yet, but they had used computers before, and they had their favorite from their college days. There was WordPerfect and everything, and none of them were like instinctual. It was always like you got to do control alt shift QRT to make it a bold type or something like that, right? Remember all that stuff? And so
every shortcuts.
But you couldn't. The problem is, since there was no standard, you couldn't share the documents. You couldn't say, you could print it out, which is the way the Army is still working, print it out, get it signed, turn it in, but you couldn't send it to anyone by email, by the intranet at the time, and things like that. Right. And so eventually someone in authority, I think it started at units, from the lower units to like higher units. And finally the whole Army's like, guess what? Bill Gates sold us. We bought Microsoft. Everyone uses Microsoft. And there was no Mac computers in the Army. They never bought those. They only bought Windows. But they said, we're only using Microsoft. We're using Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, Microsoft PowerPoint. That's what we're doing. That's what we're going to do it. And that's what they stuck with for my whole career.
I think the reason that big companies sometimes appear to be slow to adopt new technology and to stick with old technology. So there's lots of applications for which Microsoft is not as good as Mac, and we all know it. And most companies still say, no, you can't use the Mac because of the friction that comes with, I can't transfer a file from this person to that person if you're not both using the same operating system. That's gotten better in the meantime. And that maybe holds out if I think of what you're describing, it's absolutely true. The early days when you were just so happy to have a word processing program, and then exactly what you described before happens. People come out with a competing version, a better version. All of a sudden there's 15 versions. People have their favorites and they stick with them, even if they're not the best ones. It's a lot better now than it used to be, in the sense that it's much, much easier to find a tool that actually works, that will help you. And it's not such a big deal to learn how to use it. My hope is that with the rapid advancement in AI technology, we might get to the point where your digital assistant actually helps take some of that difficult searching work and guesswork out of the process for you. So it is aware, hey, here's the 15 different apps and programs that Randy's running to run his business. And he wants to introduce a new one, a scheduler, a grammar checker, whatever. I know that given his other 15 programs, the AI now, he can only use these 3. So I'm not even going to recommend to him or let him install any of the other 15 that are available because they're going to mess something up. That would be really a useful tool, that someone comes up with a way to say, you don't have to go through all the work of figuring out technical stuff. That's not really what you want the tool for, right? Nobody wants to have to learn a new interface. You just want to be able to say, hey, I'd like to be able to run my calendar now automatically. Can you find me a tool to help do that? Then I think we would enter into a new era where we reduce a lot of the friction. Do you think that is at all realistic? Or am I just watching too many Iron Man movies where you can talk to your AI and it does stuff for you?
No, and I've been using Siri more than ever in the last 6 months, where I just tell Siri to do stuff, and I have automatic shortcuts on my phone. And so I think some people are probably maybe Elon Musk is probably already there. Is probably at the Iron Man level or pretty close to it.
So there is some promise, and you're already testing it out with some sorts of verbal commands. And you've described them here and on a few other episodes, I think, just scheduling time to work on something. Do you do it for more than that, to schedule a writing session or an editing session? What else do you use your Hey Siri for?
Well, I use Siri to set my alarms. I tell Siri to shut my alarm off. I do my workouts. I have like interval workouts. And so I'll just tell Siri to start and stop while I got my boxing gloves on when I can't even touch the phone, and things like that. I also, I find myself not writing my personal writing enough as a writer. And so I set Siri to set up a 20-minute sprint session, which is activated when I say, hey, Siri, sprint. and she sets up a 20-minute timer, my writing music, and then I go to town for 20 minutes when I have 20 minutes sitting around waiting for something to happen, waiting for a meeting or something. I can say I can get my 20 minutes of writing out of the way. But stuff that just maybe makes my life 5 seconds faster, but also stuff I wouldn't do otherwise if I didn't, like if I had that 20 minutes, then I was like, okay, I got to set my 20-minute timer, and then I got to get and it takes me 30 seconds, but it's like, do I want to get up and do that? Or, hey, Siri, sprint. Okay, I'm ready to go. So that isn't making my life easier, or am I just lazy? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I think probably a better question would be like, what are the top 3 technology things that you right now make your life a lot easier?
So you mentioned writing before, doing these little sprint writings as prompted by Siri when you're ready for it. And I have found, it's going to sound trivial, but there's 2 or 3 tools that I said, all right, I'm going to try this based on recommendations from other writers that actually are way more helpful than I realized. And I feel a little bit like you described yourself feeling when you finally started using Calendly, your calendar app. And the ones that I have been using are a grammar tool called Grammarly. It just is sitting there in the background, and when I type, it shows up with a little color, indication, hey, is this the right word? Or maybe this is a misspelling. It fixes misspellings automatically, but it also makes grammar recommendations. I thought I was a pretty good writer, and I'm a native English speaker, and I know grammar really well. Holy crap. That Grammarly thing has totally opened my eyes to how much I could improve. And it was automatic and easy. And my experience with Grammarly made me think maybe there are other tools that I should consider. So the next 2 I tried out, which aren't as meaningful, but still encourage me that there's more to be explored here, are a headline analyzer tool, also an automatic plugin. I just can put a headline or a draft headline in there, and it'll tell me, okay, how good a headline is this for search engine optimization and readability and stuff like that. So specifically for stuff that you're publishing online, it'll help you figure out if you've written a good and interesting headline. And similar, here's something so simple: the difference between title case and sentence case. Can you write a proper title case headline? Which words are capitalized and which ones aren't? I thought I knew, but then when I put it into this very simple title case analyzer, it just makes it easy to not have to. And it's little stuff. It takes you a few seconds, right? But I also found a surprising benefit from having a few things like that automated. So those are just a few that I'm using specific to writing that had a bigger impact than I thought, and did not have any kind of big learning curve or something that I felt like I had wasted my time figuring them out.
So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to launch you into the pits of despair with the same thing we were talking about earlier, like, hey, find something that can fix your grammar and spelling better, and it's simple and it's in the background, and you found Grammarly, which I think is probably one of the first big ones that was out there.
Don't tell me Hemingway editor is better or something like that.
ProWriter is supposed to be better. And I just bought a year subscription to something called Perfect It, which is immediately connected to the Chicago Manual of Style, which is the standard for most copy editing and stuff, which is useful for me as a editor as well. And so it's supposed to immediately link up with the most up-to-date online Chicago Manual of Style, and then look at it with that eye so that you're up to date on everything from the Chicago Manual of Style. So I haven't used it. I just bought it like 2 days ago. So we'll see I don't know if that works or better or not. But I still use Grammarly, and all my friends use ProWriting. I haven't switched over, but and also Perfect It does not do what Grammarly does. It's just talking about the style of writing, where the proper use of words and things like that.
Yeah, so this illustrates a couple of things that are consistent with what we've been talking about. You need to be very careful to identify what are the needs you're trying to meet. For me, Grammarly is sufficient because I'm writing mostly, 800-word short articles and blog posts for which citation and, the manual of style type things are a little bit less relevant. It would probably be useful, but incrementally, am I going to see that much greater benefit by switching to another tool? Probably not. Even if admittedly the tool was better, the switching cost and the process of evaluating it means it's probably not something I'm going to do.
I mean, you keep talking about Calendly, and if they hadn't listened to the other episode, I mean, Calendly really changed my life as a software I use all the time. And it's because I started out as a one-man show editor. I was making appointments. I didn't have a hell of a lot of appointments, 1 or 2 a month. So that was really easy to put them in my calendar. Then I got a partner. So we had to, and we're in really different time zones, like 8 hours apart. And we had to figure out common times that we could meet people that were also probably in different time zones. And then we started getting more clients, like 3, 5, 10 a month, 12, 15 sometimes. And it started getting really complicated to sync our schedule with the person in 3 different time zones. And there's probably, I know of at least 3 different services that do what Calendly does, which is kind of link your Google Calendar and send emails out and let people choose from your calendars and stuff like that. But I just took Calendly, and some people are telling me that's dumb because another one's better because it has better this, and this. But I was like, all I really want to do is sync the calendars. I don't want to do all the this, and this, all the extra stuff. All I'm focused right now is linking the calendars. And if I find that I'm spending a lot of time doing this, and this, then I'll look for an app to do that and figure it out later.
I don't know if it's helpful to draw a distinction between how to think about the apps and tools you're considering. And the one that comes to mind as I hear you talk is you can think of your tools as helping you with a process, or you can think of them as helping you on a substantive area. So Calendly is a process. It helps you figure out how to manage your calendar and coordinate with others. And that's extremely helpful and helps make you more efficient. Other stuff like correcting your grammar, that's substantive, or working with Excel or Access or Word or PowerPoint. Those are actually trying to help you create a product. And I think sometimes people blur the line there, and it helps me at least to try and focus on, well, what am I trying to achieve here? Am I just trying to improve my process? In which case I'm very focused on the efficiency aspect of, is this going to be easy to use? Does it create frictions in any other way? If it's a substantive question, there's something I want to accomplish. I need to make a logo. I need to make a picture. I need to, get an actual result at the end. Then it's worth, in my view, spending a little bit more time to find something that's going to get you exactly the result that you want. Process, there's lots of different ways to schedule a meeting. And if you find one that works for you and it's efficient, great, go with it and don't worry about it. But if you really, 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 really need the perfect calculation in an Excel sheet, well, you probably should be using Excel, not your calculator or some other, hand calculation. I don't know if that's a helpful distinction or not, but it's one that I think I do sometimes think of when I'm trying to evaluate whether to use a new tool.
No, I mean, I think you need to identify your problem. And this is like really important with story building too. You need to identify the protagonist problem. And in this case, I'm the protagonist of the story. So what is my pain point? I gotta, and so what specifically do I need it to do? Does it have all kinds of other bells and whistles that I may or may not use down the line? Well, that's going to take a lot of time to research. And I don't know, it depends on how much time I want to invest in figuring this out. Does it solve my problem, my biggest pain point? That's what I was looking at. And it's like, yes, it's easy. It has like a 30-day test trial. And I started working on it for 30 days, and it made my life so much easier that, of course, just like they wanted me to, I bought it. and then I get all kinds of other, propaganda, and I got a lot of other peers that use different stuff because they have a lot of different bells and whistles that they use, but I don't. And that's not what I use it for. That's not what I got it for. And there's probably a lot of stuff on the table that someday I may learn may make my life a little bit easier, but really I have other pain points away from my calendar that I have to fix first before I'm going to go in and do a workflow where it's automatically going to send an invoice, but I still got to input the information of the invoice. So why?
Well, this illustrates something that happens when you go looking for tools to solve a pain point or a problem. If you spend any time researching them, you will realize you have way more problems than you realized before you started. And people are going to say, hey, Randy, you didn't know, but you could do this, 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 and this. And all of a sudden you're thinking about 20 things that you didn't have on your mind at all. Maybe it's a pain point, maybe it's not a pain point. What it is it's an opportunity for potential optimization, but it's also, again, to use the word, a gigantic distraction. So focusing on really, I mean, it's not to say that you can't optimize your process and come up with improvements, even ones that you didn't have in mind, but the temptation or the distraction that you're going to get from the people trying to sell you new services and new tools is immense as soon as you start going out to look for a single solution. I mentioned a second ago, do you need a logo? Well, I needed a logo for a side project I'm working on. I want to create a publication on Medium and I wanted to have my own little logo for it. And so like, all right, I could just whip up something quick and spend 10 minutes on it. Or I went on this site that offers to make a professional logo package. And then I had a logo I liked, took me hours and hours and hours of something that should have taken 5 minutes, but okay, there's so many options of things I can look at. And then I'm trying to decide how to check out and be done. I can buy a one-off thing or I can buy a subscription. And with the subscription, I get 120 other things, letterhead and cards. And it's like, oh, what do I need? What do I want? And I bought the subscription, right? And it's cool. It's wonderful. I've wasted hours and hours looking at 70 different uses of logos I'm never going to use. You want a t-shirt or a tote bag? So I was presented with options for services for things I didn't know I needed and I ultimately don't need. And I was upsold. And so don't think that your voyage into the world of optimization tools is going to be a one-way street. It's going to be lots and lots of detours, lots of dead ends, lots of routes where you say, I don't know why I went down there, but I have just lost 5 hours of my life. I'm not going to get back.
So I guess another tool that changed my writing life is called Scrivener. I know so many people that have been told Scrivener is great for writers, and they use Scrivener just like Word. And then they're confused because they can't get it to format right. I mean, there is a huge learning curve to Scrivener, especially using it to make your life easier as a writer. And it took me a while to figure that out. And I actually had to take a course. I took a course for $150 or whatever. And I spent, 8 hours of my life watching this course, but it literally changed my writing life and my organization and my editing life too. I mean, it brought so many tools to the table that I hadn't even thought about, or maybe I'd thought about, but didn't think were available. And so I think there's something to be said about, I don't know. There's so many people that don't know that there's something better than Word out there, and they don't want to take the time to learn it. But I feel like I've saved hundreds, if not, over 1,000 hours of time in the last 5 years that I've used Scrivener, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to give people advice, I would say you can become a lot more efficient and save time if you make judicious use of tools. And you get it, again, substantively and process-wise. I would focus on the process first because it's relatively easy. So to deal with administrative tasks and to just save time making repetitive things easier. But when it comes to stuff that you're describing, if it's core to your work, where you really are going to be a better writer if you learn how to use this tool, if it's genuinely important to the thing that you're working on, then it is worth investing time to really learn how to use a useful tool. You had to go through a pretty steep learning curve, but now that you've done it, it really does make a difference in your work product, doesn't it? So maybe one way to think about that is if you spend some time dealing with the administrative processes, the things that otherwise cause you wasted time that you can systematize, like dealing with your calendar, you free up time to then invest in the substantive tools that are actually going to help you create better product at the end.
Yeah. I mean, And then there's other tools, writing tools that people have recommended me or that I've got an email, paraphernalia about. And I'm like, that sounds interesting. I even paid for a course thinking it was going to be the new Scrivener or something. And I was just like, wow, this is really complicated. And I've even mastered a couple of those, but then I can't communicate to the writers with it because it's so complicated. When I show them that I'm helping them, they're not helped because it's just too complicated for them and all they want to do is write. So it goes back to, is it for you? Is it for a team? How much time do you actually want to spend on it? What is your gain from using it? Like time wise, effort wise, blood, sweat and tears wise. And I think that just needs to be a real good kind of assessment of that before you go off the deep end and buy a tote bag that you don't want.
I think they're going to be awesome. And we're going to offer them to listeners of Passionately Wrong as well. I had a point I wanted to make there. You distracted me with the tote bag, Randy.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. I don't know. I gotta really.
Oh, I was going to say this. I remember what it was. It was, and then hopefully you'll remember your thought as well. For various reasons, people think differently. They're working on different things. They're at different stages in their life or their career. There will always be people using and recommending different tools. Don't worry about it. People just work differently and think differently. You don't have to do the same as other people. And it's okay if you get comfortable working with a certain setup to just stick with it for a while. You don't need to be always optimizing your use of tools. It's actually not necessary. Once you've got yourself in a good spot and you don't have a lot of obvious pain points, then you're in a good spot, right? Flow with it.
Yeah, no, I actually didn't know about the title case checker and analyzer, and I'd like you to make sure you leave that in the notes because I need to, or send it to me because I want to look it up.
Yeah, we'll do. And, when I say stick with what you've got that works, you can be open to the potential for something new. No problem. But if it should always come back to, does this help me save some time at the end, or does this help me improve my substantive output? Okay, well, we probably spoke a little bit more about writing than some of our listeners are going to be happy about. Any other important technology or apps that we use outside the area of writing? You mentioned just scheduling quick workouts for your fitness. I, in a previous episode, mentioned something as basic as just calendaring, scheduling in my calendar tool time for workouts. That is not exactly what you described, but very similar, making sure that we find a way to do our physical workouts. Anything related to other health aspects like nutrition? I know some people who became religious about apps that track their calories, for example, and used it as a way to reduce their weight. I don't use much myself, but I'm just curious, is there anything that you found a tool that relates to health?
I did. The only app I use is a interval timer. But other than that, if I had a stopwatch interval timer, I'd probably use that just as much, but I haven't been able to find one.
Here's a tool that I thought about the other day that has totally transformed navigating the world, and that is obviously online maps, right? So Google Maps or whatever map tool you use. I remember taking big trips with nothing more than handwritten notes or a paper map.
Rand McNally.
Exactly. People growing up today, my kids, for example, your kids, they have no idea what a difference it makes. Another one I would say also related to travel and navigating around.
They have no idea also what to do when their phone goes down either.
Right. No, and for a while when those maps first came out, I would always create a paper backup of my Google Maps. I'd have the written descriptions just in case. If I don't have a signal, if I run out of battery, whatever. To which they say, "Oh, well, I just downloaded an offline version of the map." I was like, what if your battery runs out?
Which it does.
That transformed navigating the world. And for you and I who've traveled to a lot of places, that makes a huge difference. I don't know if you're pretty good with languages, so you may or may not use this, but automatic translation tools as well. I'm hearing more and more people say that they don't feel uncomfortable traveling anywhere now, whether or not they speak the language, because at a minimum, their phone will translate the signs. But it also seems like there is much greater quality in translating oral communication. So someone can talk and into your phone and you can understand it, and you can talk into your phone and it'll translate back to them. That, and for me, also travel relevant, something as basic as knowing that I'll always be able to get a ride by Uber or some other rideshare application. That's not a small deal. I remember the first several times I went to China, when I didn't really speak much Chinese, I was worried about getting lost somewhere and not being able to make my way back. I would have the name of my hotel printed out in Chinese and the name of my contact right there, so that if I got lost, I could at least hand a piece of paper to somebody. That, and I learned, enough Chinese to be able to say what I wanted to say about where I was going. But now those concerns are much less than they used to be. So we are not
Yeah.
Luddites. We're not saying don't use apps. Of course, we embrace it, but recognize that it comes with a complexity and a cost, and don't let other people tell you what apps you should be using. Focus on your own processes, pain points. And yeah, if you have suggestions for apps and tools that you're using, you can write in and let us know. And otherwise, we may revisit this topic at a future episode if we realize we left out some important topics that people might be interested in.
Sounds like a good end of the year, like best tools and applications of technology that we used in the year.
I like that idea. And one of the things I'm working on that is sort of a meta app is going to be, how do you know what tools are the right ones to use? There's app ratings, of course, but those are not sufficient because they don't tell you whether that app is going to be useful for you in your circumstances. So some way of really making recommendations for advice and tools personal and giving you a better way of deciding whether it's going to be good for you. I would like to work on that. And it is my Medium publication project. More on that in a future episode.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
We'd love to hear what you think, so please comment on the show with your thoughts. We read all of your comments.
Thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. See you next time.